Technology, and he's the general manager for the Rome Group, which provides research operations, maintenance, engineering, and IT services to NASA Langley Research Center. So, Brant Adams.
Thank you. My colleague here, he's also general manager at the White Sands facility, and both of us kind of cut our teeth at the same time as rocket scientists, as it were, working on bombs to kill people, working on ballistic motors, Minuteman type and peacekeeper, things like that. But both of us have actually gotten into civil space, working for peaceful space exploration and technology development, and I have found that to be a lot more rewarding. And so I'm going to give you a little bit at the front end of this presentation about my perspective, and then what I'm going to do is rather than show you a bunch of view graphs, I'm going to want to find out where y'all sit. One of the things I hope to do in this dialogue is to get a feel for your generation. Some people call it Generation X. In fact, the people that saw me last year, we did something similar. This time I'm going to try to take the tape that we're taping right now. And I've got a microphone floating around, and when we talk, I'd like you to talk to the microphone. Because I want the NASA hierarchy to actually hear your voice. I wonder sometimes if y'all's voice gets heard. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to do a little bit more interaction. I'm a geek. I like widgets. I love smoking. I love rockets. But we're not going to deal with that a lot in this presentation. I'm not going to throw numbers at you or anything else. I'm actually going to talk about the state of the world and talk a little bit about where, if I was in your shoes, what I would be looking at in the next 10 years. Okay? So for credibility, or whatever you want to call it, I'm going to talk a little bit about myself. I don't know about you guys. I don't know why y'all are in here. We're going to talk about that in a minute, why you're in here, why you're fascinated with space. But for me, in '69, I was in a Baptist church, and they stopped services to put a black and white TV in the middle of the auditorium. And we watched Neil Armstrong step on the moon. And I became a geek, man. That started me on a path of just reading anything I could get, and I never faltered from that. I have been involved for my whole career building stuff to get astronauts in space, in one way or the other. I did spend a period of time working on Enelsat, which is getting MTV down to you and getting communications down to you. Keith actually worked on it also. We worked at different stages. But I worked on that solid rocket attached to a satellite. I've worked on the space shuttle. I've worked solids. And for those of y'all that don't know, for rocket scientists, solids people are like IBMers, and liquids people are like Macintoshers. And they argue all the time. Well, I got to work on both sides, because I worked SSME and I worked the solids also. So those were all really cool programs, but I kind of came at the wrong time, because whenever I really hit where I wanted to get into a new development, we just kept flying shuttle. And if I wanted to get into rockets, I needed to stay in the military arena. What I ended up doing through a series of, I was lucky, is I ended up dropping the propulsion stuff, and I went into work in the systems integration. And I spent 10 years on the station. I'm very proud of it. I had every flight of hardware except for the lab and the airlock, which had the manned stuff, and it was at Huntsville. So I basically signed off on all of the solar arrays, the truss sections, and everything else. So I was very intimately involved with all the boxes on the shuttle. I'm very proud of that. And it took a lot of effort, a lot of long nights, a lot of hard work, but I saw a lot of neat stuff. And my job was a collaborator to take the geeks who couldn't talk to people and talk to people. Some of y'all in this room will find that to be your path. Some of y'all will become the geeks that become an expert in some area, and all those are good fields. And it's a lot of fun. I've had a lot of fun over my career. But I still regret, and you'll see it in the charts as I go further, that we don't have a heavy launch capability. That's what I had when I was 12, that's what really grabbed my heart. was going to the moon. And so I was always working. In fact, we were told in an auditorium with the administrator of NASA, there was about 14 of us, we were told we got to do this first before we go to the moon. And that's the primary reason why I was on the station, was because I wanted to get that out of the way so I could go to the moon. And I just kind of told you my passion about the view. So, that was my story with regard to why my passion is where it is, and why I've spent the past 20 years working in where I am. Y'all are at the first part of your journey. Why are y'all members of SEDS? I mean, what is there about this? There hasn't been another lunar landing where it just hits you right between the eyes from where I sit. Was it the station? Is there something about the station? I'd like to hear y'all's view. Any takers? Is it on? It's on. Please flip it up.
Yes. Personally, I feel, something that Stephen Hawking said, which I think is remarkably brilliant, is that the story of Earth is one of extinction, and there have been, in Earth's history, 7 recorded mass extinctions where 90% of life on Earth has been wiped out. So he went on to say that it isn't a matter of if, but a matter of when the human race will go extinct if we can only stay on Earth.
So you're not a 10-year person, you're like a 1,000-year person, or a 1,000,000-year person. You're looking pretty far away.
Well, I mean, yes, but in order for any of that to happen, it needs to start. I mean, it needs to start going to the moon in order to come up with closed-circuit systems and sustainable living that is doable on areas that aren't, exactly perfected for human life.
Gotcha. Anybody else? That is actually very, and most people don't think that long far. I have one right here, I'll get to you.
I guess why I'm interested in this is that, and I ask the question out to everybody, do you ever look at the stars and realize, wow, there's like a billion of those out there? And with those billions of stars, there's like millions of possibilities for other worlds, other habitable Earths to be out there as well. So I guess why I'm part of this, because maybe not in my future this is possible. I want to set the standard for space exploration to other worlds out there. Kind of like what he said over there. That's what I'm mostly interested in. And also, I'm a sci-fi junkie as well. So it's like, you read these books.
How many are sci-fi junkie in here? That's a common denominator. It really is a common denominator. And I'm sorry, I interrupted.
Well, I was just saying that, you read about all these sci-fi things and is this possible? It's not possible, no, but you want it to be possible. And even if it's not possible, and like I said, in my time period, in my generation, I at least want to set the stage for it, or be in part responsible for going along the path of space exploration, because it is the final frontier.
I think there is a connection in the view that which ones? Am I on even?
I doubt any of it's on.
I'm not on. So much for the first part of that video. You guys are, y'all don't have the emotional impact I had with the walk on the moon. You really, from what I'm hearing. But the people in this room.
I think we do. It's just, it wasn't from NASA. It was the X Prize.
Okay.
So I would say that our Apollo moment was X Prize launching and us realizing that with or without NASA, we're going to go into space and do this stuff. And I think that's the big difference, is that we've been stuck in shuttle for, I guess, Challenger happened before almost everyone in this room was born. So shuttle is just, it's like the old car. My parents don't drive a 30-year-old car. I wouldn't either. And I think that what changed and what got a lot of people more excited was the X Prize, was all the stuff that's going on that says, NASA, with or without you, we're going to go to space, we're going to do this stuff. And so it's not a single point failure anymore if Congress or the president or whoever decides it's not a good idea.
How many agree with that? Did the X Prize really get your interest? And how well read are you? Do y'all follow it every time it comes up in the news? Okay, that's a good data point. I spent a little more time on the subject, but I owe letting you talk.
Okay. Well,
It's not a.
He's got you on that, so go ahead.
all right. I guess it's whatever. I was gonna say that I first got interested in space from actually going to my local library and seeing all these pretty pictures actually of like the stars and planets and whatnot. And then I got a telescope and I started looking up, and I don't know, that got really, it was really inspiring. Eventually, like, I had to make a decision whether I wanted to, I guess, be like into astronomy or like the aerospace, and I thought I would do aerospace since, like with astronomy you can't really, like I also read a lot of science fiction too, so that probably played a role. But like, I wanted to do something which could, I guess, transform a dream into reality, and so I thought that aerospace engineering, you know, that would be the way to go. Since eventually, maybe I can actually build something. I can actually go up there and basically push.
Well, that's a theme I'm hearing. I'm hearing a theme that you guys want to make something happen.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing two areas. One is curiosity of what's out there, curiosity of the universe, and there's the competition. Okay. And that's a restructure, that part's a restructure of what I saw in the 60s and in the 70s, and I'll get into that in just a second. But what I think is cool is your generation, and I don't think you're a majority, I think this is a minority, but the people in here, which is cool. I was impressed last time I talked of the quality and the knowledge of the kids that came. Hope y'all don't mind me calling you kids. That you guys really have a curiosity that's a lot farther out there than what your colleagues that are taking other subjects. So, I'm going to skip this, but I'm going to tell you what it's about. It's basically, when I was researching this paper, I read a book called The World is Flat. Anybody read that book? Okay. Man, you impressed me. What it does is it talks about some factors that from a career perspective should scare the pee-waddly-doo out of you guys. Because it goes through and explains in the world order, in the world's view, how many smart people, as smart as you guys, are dying to have a jobs at McDonald's in China and India. And I just couldn't fathom it. You know, I'm from West Texas. I've been working in the space program, but we've been very myopic. In fact, my colleagues are very myopic too, and I don't think we realize, not even in the NASA organizations, in the education organizations, I don't think we realize the competition that China's going to give us in the next few years. So if you ever get a chance, y'all need to get the Clip Notes or something on the flat world. It's pretty interesting on how much talent's out there. So from here, what I want to do is taking this vision and knowledge that you guys are pretty darn smart. I'm going to talk a little bit about my perspective, and we'll dialogue where I think we're going to go in the next 2 years. And I want to hear your perspective from what you read in the paper and what you see, where you think we're going to go in the next year. First off, I'm going to talk about what I see is the current American condition with regard to space. The thing that would really float my boat and float some of y'all's boat from doing rockets and going, you know, space exploration and technology development. Right now you got a new president. In fact, the presidency is a 4-year rotation. And it's like, in my career, every time I got started on something, a new president would come along and we'd stop. I don't know how many man-related programs. I've worked on 5 or 6. Some of y'all probably never even heard of, or we thought we were going to go do something and then we got stopped. You got a new NASA administrator. I worked with Mike Griffin and knew him very well, and I knew his passion was the same as mine, going to the moon. Bolden, I don't know where, he's a nice guy, he's a great guy, I've heard him talk, but I don't know if he has that drive to really take us that direction. Bailouts, oh my gosh. You know, the Apollo industry had, the Apollo had to worry about the Vietnam War, they not have to worry about the bank bailouts and GM and everybody else. We got healthcare question, talking about $860-something billion worth of debt associated with that. And then the Afghanistan question is very similar to the Vietnam question they had when we were going to the moon. So there's a lot of stuff out there that your generation, if everybody in here, if I'm reading the tea leaves right, wants to make a change, a technology change, and be a part of history, you're going to be fighting against these things in the next 10 years. It's tough. So, you know, I scratch my head and wonder, how much is the U.S. going to pay attention to space exploration in the next 10 years? As I put this view graph together, I put some of these colored bars together, and you know, I got to thinking, Augustine Commission, it's got everything in a fluff. My colleague here, Keith, he brought, every time I read something else in it that I didn't read before. And he actually called me up short about 3 hours ago, and I went and reread it. And I changed my view in some of the things they were saying, and you brought it to my attention too. But what do you guys, how many of y'all have read the short version of the Augustine Commission report? That's real impressive. Good thing? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? What's your view on that? I'd like to hear your view on, I'd like to hear your view on it. So what did you think about the Augustine Commission report?
I feel like it's both good and bad. It provides a couple different options. Some which like I personally favor, but some which I'm not, you know, so favorable. But it's good in that it organizes thoughts, I think. Before it was just kind of scattered out there. You know, what are we going to do? We have these new rockets we're developing. Like, what are we going to use them for? And it was good that it kind of like organized everyone's thoughts together and said like, here are 3 possible options that are pretty well laid out in that, you know, you could do and different paths you could take. So that collecting of thoughts I think was good, but overall I question like, I guess I question what their motivation was behind each of those thoughts that they came up with.
That's good, and until you actually talk to them one-on-one, you get the press's perspective, and you get scare tactics by Boeing and Lockheed and others because they're you know, they've got a mission or a direction they want to do, and you can't blame any of them. But until you talk to those individuals, you don't know quite whether they're thinking like you. I reread. He gave me a hard copy of it. I reread it, and basically, the bottom line is they say we don't have enough money. And they give some, I'm a person that really thinks we don't have to have a Saturn V, but I think we have to have some heavy lift for America to stay in front of China and stay in front of India. Absolutely has to happen. I'm very passionate about that. And a lot of what's in the Augustine report gives Congress an out. Selects all these other options. It means we're not going to have a heavy lift, and we're just going to put it off. And you guys are going to go through what I went through. You're not going to really get to work with something that's it's neat stuff, but it's not going to be that really big thing. And that's my bias. It's very much a bias. But what they do say, they have a couple options in there, and they say that if they put another $3 billion in NASA budget, then there are some options that you can just barely get there. And that's 20% rise in the NASA budget. And I believe that it's well worth it because they flattened the NASA budget for the past 7 or 8 years, hadn't even kept up with inflation in any form or fashion. And let me give you a piece of information that if you're talking to somebody at the pizzeria or something, did you know that the NASA budget right now is $17 billion? You know, that's a lot of money, right? A lot of money. But it pays for education stuff, it pays for environmental, looking at the Earth stuff, it pays for all kinds of things. They got guys that are studying mushrooms, you know, and figuring out ways to use that for food in orbit. There's just lots of stuff going on with NASA. Some of it not so good, some of it's waste. You know what they spend on reading emails for potential terrorist attacks? This is just this is in the thinking of CIA and all that. They spend $45 billion a year.
Well, they're building like the newest, biggest data center in the world or something.
Well, and this isn't just this one time. This is what they've been spending for the past couple of years. you know, there are aircraft that cost $1.5 billion. And so $16 billion, I know it's a lot of money if you're in a small country, but for us and for a national thing that I think, of course I'm biased, but think as much of, it's pretty much chump change.
How much did cash for clunkers cost? Remember? No, $3 billion in about 3 weeks. The country spent $3 billion on cash for clunkers. Think of what that would have done for NASA in an entire year in terms of education and employment and technical advancement of skills.
We could buy some used space shuttles.
We don't need any used space shuttles. Hey, listen, I was on just to show you where I was sat on that position. I was the Maverick in '92, and I was talking to Golden Commission. If that's way before your time, he was the administrator at NASA, and they wanted me to talk about when we take the shuttle down. And I put a view graph up with a dinosaur laying on top of the shuttle, and I said we need to take it down either 2003 or 2005, and they ran me out of there. So if you take a look at the technology in the shuttle, it's an awesome device, but dang, you know, y'all are a lot smart. Y'all could bring, this age group could bring so much more to the table. I mean, you take a look at the technologies we have today. I'm going to get off track. The sky's the limit on the stuff that you guys can bring forward. There's so much out there now that we can bring to a new flight vehicle. But anyway, I could talk an hour on that stuff. Let's make sure I got a perspective. What do y'all think of the station? That's my baby. Yes, sir.
Well, I mean, I was going to ask you, if you wanted to shut down in 05, what do you think about the proposed ISS shutdown?
I pushed real hard when I was on the station. I was put on a thing to say what we do with it. I really, really, really want to turn it into a national laboratory. And so, you know, they say they want to bring it back in 2015. I can't use cuss words, but that's stupid idea. Stupid, stupid. What we ought to do is turn it over to the National Space Foundation or Science Foundation and let them run it as a lab and probably take 20% of the floor space. Of course, the countries will want to keep their floor space, and you make them pay for that. But our floor space, you lease it out to universities, you lease it out to different organizations, metallurgical organizations, Alcoa, and things like that. People don't realize the kinds of small incremental advances we've gotten with doing long-term low-G research. But that's what I think we ought to do. I think that's what we should have done with the shuttle. I think in 2000, we should have made a deal with United, this is kind of flippant, but United Airlines or somebody to run it, and we basically guaranteed, the government guaranteed buys and decrease them until the point where it didn't pay for itself. And then we figure out where we go from there.
Well, how do you get that in the first place?
How did we get where we were in the first place?
Or how do you get to the point where you have these giant vehicles, this giant station that costs billions of dollars, and you essentially give it or sell it off to a different organization?
The Space Act agreement.
Okay.
There's I can't remember the year, but there's a year Space Act agreement. And it has all the guidelines on how you take national and government assets and you turn them over on a lease agreement with private industry. Ames has got a couple of their wind tunnels that they're using the Space Act agreement to work on. And there's different ways of doing that now. And they haven't been there for about 15 years. It's a relatively new idea. Let's see, and apparently, Keith, I keep pointing at my colleague, by the way, he's a good guy, really good guy. He has said that y'all will be more interested in commercialization of space than you will be of a government-run space. Is that right?
Could we have both?
Pardon me?
Could we have both?
I'm sorry, my hearing is shot.
I'm sorry, could we have both?
I think we can have both. I think there's room for both. That's a good statement.
Could it be run by government and then leased out? I mean, that's a business model right there.
That's and when I heard that, I didn't hear that option. And my bias is I like that option better. When I heard Keith talk about that, because he's talked to some of y'all in the hallway. A lot of people, I looked over, I worked with the state of New Mexico with because I was known as somebody through the Ward's group to have done a lot of space, basically airports, space airports. I did a lot of stuff with that. And they were sold a bill of goods. Blue Horizon, a lot of those capital venture groups, they don't tell the whole story. And so I have a little bit of angst when I hear people say that commercial space is going to work. When I also hear these capital ventures, capitalists working the system, and that sounded funny the way I phrased it. They don't tell you the whole story because they equate orbital mechanics or going into orbit at the same level as going into space. And they play on people's ignorance to get money to do that. And so people like you are going to have to be awake on that. When these companies come up and say we're going to commercialize space, you're going to have to be smart enough to call them on it when they're really not telling the whole story. That was kind of a sidebar, but I felt it was important. If you guys think the commercial space needs to be the premier ahead of the government, then y'all are going to have to kick in and make sure the government doesn't do something stupid.
My points that I've always thought about when I started hearing more about the commercialization of space is saying, wouldn't it be like other things where the government would lead would be the icebreaker in front, and then industry follows behind it?
That's what I lived through, and I do believe in that. But NASA hasn't figured out how to do that handoff. And probably if you guys are going to make a change in the world, that's one of the things y'all ought to tick off, is try to teach NASA how to do that handoff.
Yeah, I don't think, like, it seems like we're not to that point yet where it's ready to be industrialized. Like, we need these commercial enterprises to keep doing what they're doing on their own terms, but then once they start doing things on a regular basis, then that's when the government will be able to start doing a handoff. So it's still a ways away, it seems.
X-Prize is a big step that way.
Yeah.
It really is. Geez, this is fun. I hope you guys are having fun, but I'm not covering the territory I want to. You know, I don't know if y'all have read your history books, but I'm not going to go through all those points. But I'll tell you a couple things. The reason why the Apollo happened wasn't because everybody was really excited about going to the moon. You know, the people drinking Tang and eating Cheerios and all. They thought it was cool. It was in the ads all the time. And their kids wanted to be astronauts, which was awesome. It changed the school systems. Technology and school systems in the United States went through a drastic improvement because of all that excitement. But there were some things happening behind the scenes that I didn't know about till I talked to colleagues that lived through it. I got the opportunity to work with a lot of those people that were living through it. And I actually sat down with a curator with the Smithsonian. And he informed me some things that I didn't know that made a real impact on me, and this was only about a year ago. Did you know that Congress is so dang short-sighted? Did you know that during the 60s, they kept trying to cut the budget? They continued all the way through until we actually landed on the moon, and they went, wow, I was a part of that. They kept trying to cut it and trying to keep pushing it out. And the administrator of NASA, what he did, he played dirty pool. Kennedy was assassinated in '64, and the Congress loved Kennedy. He was a national hero, and he could do no wrong. And so every time the administrator came before a budget cutting committee, he started out with, you want to shut down the legacy of John F. Kennedy. And they would back off. And I'd never heard that. I didn't know that. I don't know if y'all have that now. And where I'm going to go with this, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but I think that I need to tell you this, is you guys have to become more involved in the overall national thing than I ever did. I was just a geek. I just was building hardware. I never even had a clue that you had to play politics. That wasn't in my, did we ever even look up, We were like the guys building the atomic bomb. We were out there just working away. This is really neat stuff, And never thought about the implications or thought about how to make it. But I think you guys are going to have to make this happen, to make it happen in a decade or a decade and a half. And I don't know what that means. But you guys are going to have to figure out some way to influence the people up in Washington, D.C. And SEDS doesn't show up much. And I'm not knocking it. I don't know whose toes I'm stepping on in here, but somehow or other, you guys are going to have to figure out whether it's Twitter, you know, this new social media stuff. I bet you guys could have an impact. And y'all are smarter than me in this stuff. I'm told that all the time by my kids. But anyway, you guys ought to figure out how to do that. Y'all ought to take this organization and use that methodology to make an influence of what they're going to do at the Augustine Commission. You know what? I just went ahead and that's my whole message. I was going to give y'all a lot of background, and I'll continue to do it. But that is my message. And I don't know who in this room has got those collaborative skills to do that. But somebody's going to have to stand up and make that happen. Because there's too many barriers in front of y'all right now. Too many barriers. It's not too many barriers if you've got the heart. But there's too many barriers if everybody just sits there.
Brant, it might be interesting talk about what the percentage of the budget, national budget was during the Apollo as compared to what it is today.
I don't have all those figures.
I got the round numbers.
Okay, you give us the round numbers then.
It was 10%. During Apollo, it was NASA got 10% of the entire budget.
Federal budget.
Federal budget. Guess how much, what percentage of the federal budget do you think NASA gets today?
0.1.
It's like 0.4%. So it's gone from 10% to 0.4%. That's a huge difference. Huge.
And right now, what everybody's worried about, if you read the paper, they're all worried. They don't even think about that. They don't think of the advantages that we saw as youths of what kind of technologies came about, which would help the whole economy situation. There was enough technology spin-offs during Apollo. It was the reason why we moved ahead of every other country. It was because of solid-state circuitry, things like that. And that can happen again if we don't get wrapped up in our shorts with regard to Afghanistan and healthcare and everything else. And I don't see any of the leaders really looking at that. Now, could you write them an email message and say, you know, do this, because healthcare is just going to gear us down? No. But I tell you what I do think that we could do. He's watched my style. I don't always follow my view graphs. I think that those leaders, if they stopped and looked, they hear the numbers, but if they really stopped and looked from your perspective, China has a talent. I've read a couple of articles where reporters were walking the streets talking to Chinese college students your very same age, and they're pumped. They're looking at, they flew a man into orbit, and they're viewing that the way I did when I was 12. They're pumped. And so, so every increment is getting a whole national pride involved with it. And so they've got the motivation. They've stepped up and said, we're going to put a station in orbit in the next 5 years. And let's face it, it takes us a while. Nowadays, it takes us a while to do things because we want them perfect. They're going to pass us. And they're looking to put a man on the moon in 2020. And I said that to that Smithsonian curator. And what I'm going to do is challenge you by his response. His response was, listen, China's they've had rockets blow up on the pad. You know, they don't have anything substantial. Bullpucky. They got people who want to get it done. And that's all it takes. And so, you know, I think that my age group is going to sit here and not realize that there's going to be, in 2020, and I'm jumping way ahead, but in 2020, 2025, there's going to be a person planting a Chinese flag on the moon. And then we're going, man, I wish we would have kind of done something a little different. And I think you guys are in a position to care more about that than they are. So I'm kind of throwing a challenge out there to you. Yes, sir.
Well, I've heard from a lot of co-worker engineers over at the Cape, from the experience that I've had, that one of the biggest concerns is that, or opinions actually, is that they think that there's too much risk management involved on our side of the world. Would you agree with that? Do you think that we're getting too cautious?
Yes. We had this conversation too, didn't we? Just about an hour ago.
Because I mean, there's a bunch of us. Like for me, I would go the distance. I got the passion to. I'll take the risks necessary. How many others feel that way? And then there's people that might not be in that risky situation, but still want to prevent a national tragedy from happening, for the sake of saying it's a sound investment or not for the congressman.
You know, the fact that you framed that question is pretty awesome. I'm of the opinion that with spin doctors, if NASA was smart, they could make it acceptable to kill 7 astronauts. I mean, you know, these people are not your average everyday Joes. Rick Husband was the commander of the Columbia. He was a buddy of mine. We went to college together and we were in study groups. So it was a big impact when he was killed. But you know what? He knew it was dangerous. He knew it was dangerous. And something that we did wrong in the, you know, in, what was it, 1980, was it 86? Was it Challenger? I think it was 86. Was we all wanted to be perfect. We were engineers. You know, you want to make 100 on your test. And so whenever we blew it up, rather than say, that's the way it's going to be, guys, like they did in the Apollo, they said, yeah, you're right, man, we really screwed up. And so we painted, we spun it so that, that the U.S. does expect for us to be perfect. Okay? So I'm with you on that. I think that is a big factor associated with it, and I think it's a big stumbling block with us. And I hadn't even prepared to talk about that.
I think one thing, though, is that it's too expensive to launch missions. So another thing is if you have a failure and the mission's $500 million, the public's going to see that very negatively. So we need to reduce the cost, too, so failure is acceptable in the dollar price.
You know, but you can still paint it. I mean, we spend a lot of money on a lot of other things. I think that if America said going to the moon was an endeavor that we're behind, and we've you know, we are a society of reality TV and things like that. I'm a real radical with my colleagues, but I wonder why we haven't started an astronaut. I'm going to get to your statement in a minute, but I'm wondering why we don't use the media and reality TV, for instance, to get people to say, this is awesome. You know, this is really cool. Let's make some astronauts some stars, okay? And during painting that picture, we painted as if they could get killed, which even makes it better TV, right? And you know what? If it cost $500 million, you know, it's for the national pride, and it's to stay in front of the Chinese. I mean, you know, you can do all those things with the press. That's the way people are. So I don't think the cost is so much a factor. I actually think it's more of the attitude that says, oh gosh, we don't want to kill anybody. I really think that's a bigger factor than the money. That's my bias.
I know that currently there are government policies against advertising.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that one. And they get around it with their military by saying you're allowed to recruit. What steps do you think would have to be taken in order to get that changed to the point where NASA can spend the money to tell the public what we're doing? Why this isn't the Apollo landing that we're trying to recreate, you know, 40 years later.
I think in your response, you're asking me the question. It says, how do we get NASA to embrace or to change the rules so that they can advertise? That's what I heard you ask. It actually goes back 2 or 3 steps. And it's back to, I was working with a group of people who thought we were doing a really neat thing. And we were doing the right thing for America. It's a sellout. It really is, and it's in their heart. It's a sellout to do that. It's a sellout to go to reality TV. It was a sellout. We had a a couple of chats about painting a Coke can on the lab of the station. You know, and we never could get past that. So what happens is you can change those laws and those rules. They can be stretched like the Army's done with recruiting. But right now, you've got most NASA employees are above the age of 48 to 53. And that generation of people feel guilty wanting to use space as a selling point.
But if there's no other way to let the public know what we're doing,
they're just going to work harder. And they're just going to try to tell the story. I mean, everybody ought to understand that insulin was invented because of NASA's. And, you know, people ought to buy into that. And the world ought to come together and everything work. We have world peace. Truly. I mean, I don't know. I think a lot of the people y'all go to school with today have that view. Many of y'all in here are really doing a neat thing, and you're probably focused on doing that neat thing and expect everybody to understand where you're coming from.
I mean, I think a big thing of that is just public relations in general for NASA. I mean,
it is public relations.
They try to make big deals about it with the Ares 1X launch, and even a little further back, I mean, when LCARS hit the moon, they made such a big deal. They got it in all the news coverage. They did all this last-second things. It was such a big deal. Then it made the impact, and like the video showed nothing. And there was nothing.
And then the Ares 1X comes about.
Yeah.
And you don't hear near the hype.
Yeah, and then even the coverage, they can't get the cap off. But I mean, even LCARS. So you have an audience. You finally are semi-engaging America, even if it's just a morning show. Then, like, nothing happens.
And you're right.
Then you have them just making fun of it. What was that? What's this big
you're
deal?
right on.
Does NASA know what they're doing? And
well, let's take, and I can throw lots of rocks at me and my colleagues, but you guys are, according to Wikipedia, y'all are extremely smart in this stuff. Y'all have been day one. Y'all are watching Sesame Street and you know, dealing with all the, see some friends, Barney the dinosaur, or whatever maybe. But anyway, so y'all are media smart. So I'm actually going to take this tape. And this was one of the cruxes. This is one of the things I wanted to really do. And I'm going to spend 10 minutes at this. I want y'all to stop and think a minute. If you were the administrator of NASA, knowing what you know about Twitter and about Facebook, what would you tell the headquarters public relations department to do? And forget, let's say we can morph the rules. I got a hand at the back. Talk loud so we can pick it up on a mic.
Fix NASA TV.
Fix it how? It's pretty mundane, or the programmers?
Buy a freaking teleprompter. The fact that the LCross mission coverage was two guys obviously sitting at a desk in one of their offices with a little backdrop, both reading just from the script right here.
Wasn't the flight director proud at the end and stood up like this?
Oh, yeah, the guy who publicly on TV got denied high five.
Yeah, yeah, he wouldn't high five the other guy, would he? Yeah, that was pretty funny.
We have millions of people out there who know how to effectively do news programs, science programs, television programs. Why is NASA TV it's stagnated?
That's a great put. That's a great input.
one thing NASA does is they admit, in terms of the youth of America, in terms of engagement, is they don't know what they're doing. They keep on coming to students whenever, like if we have a speaker from NASA who comes out to the university or at a joint event, they keep on asking us, and they've sent their PR people to our university. They sent like their 6 main people from KSC.
Yeah.
They said, what should we be doing? Because we keep on hiring people, and they come up with ideas, and they keep on failing. And this summer I worked as an intern at KSC, and they brought all the interns together and all the co-ops together, and they said, hey, give us some ideas. Let's brainstorm.
So you telling me I'm wasting my time asking you this here, or are you saying?
I'm saying that we need to get, you know, a wider variety. We need to get people into this because right now they're just grasping at straws because they've tried various things and they want to come up with some websites where little kids can play video games and can, you know, astronaut on the moon or you know, pretending to drive a rover, and they come up with ideas. However, it's not necessarily going to be mainstream enough that they think making NASA video games is necessarily going to catch on.
Okay.
And something, if they're going to engage it, they need to, I don't know, just get more youth involvement. I mean, they're going that way, and I've seen a lot of that from the people they're hiring.
Well, that's
Because
good.
they're revamping their entire departments, and they're trying. But you know, NASA now has like 8,000 different Twitters, one for every astronaut, one for every mission, one for.
Do y'all
every-
get Twitters on the missions?
Yeah.
Good.
But they're going in the right direction. But if I can just take a short little leeway to another topic, I mean, I worked in the same building as the Constellation and Orion offices in the ONC at KSC. And I mean, just like at lunch in the cafeteria, the people were so down and out of it, just waiting to hear the Augustine Commission's report.
Augustine Commission took NASA to its knees. Everybody nobody would make a decision. We canceled meetings. It was crazy. I owe this guy next.
And all the people who work in Constellation and Orion, just knowing that the work is probably not going to be used. And these are people who've been with NASA for 20, 30 plus years, and they're just seeing it nowhere. There's no motivation out there.
Well, and what I'm doing is, in talking to you guys, is I'm saying, we'll work on that with the older people, the older farts. Y'all have got an opportunity. You really do. And if they see the enthusiasm come from y'all, it'll change that whole. I do believe that. Yes, sir. You raised your hand a second ago.
I was going to say something about the NASA TV, but I lost the
Okay.
thought.
Go ahead.
Well, I think a big thing is that back in the days of Apollo is that we had that leadership where it was so headstrong that we knew where we were going, whether it was going to be possible or not. And I think that's what sparked the imagination. Right now, we're making it very transparent about everything's up in the air. We don't know. We're being wishy-washy, and that's killing the spark.
It is killing the spark. And Augustine the people on the Augustine Commission, they really were trying to do the right job. But the way it was played out with the new president and everything else, it has. It's like this surge forward to do the right thing and then pull them back. And that's killing a vision of for y'all's future, going to someplace else. Yes, sir.
Especially for, like, one of the things that, especially for our generation, got us excited was for SpaceX, the competition of it. And I know it was done in the past, specifically the Air Force, for the new vehicles, was fly-offs. And why NASA is deciding all their vehicles based on committees instead of actually having working products, I don't know. I think that would be, I mean, it's a big step, but that is a little bit off, but that's one thing.
So for the benefit of the camera.
Sorry.
No, I'm going to take your. I saw something in there. If I'm stating wrong, straighten me out. But based on something he said earlier too, I put the two together is maybe what NASA management needs to do is to take heart, maybe be more aggressive in the SpaceX world, where instead of awarding $1 million, award $300 million or $500 million and do something fairly grandiose. Something that a lot of people say can't be done. You know, like put something on the moon. That's way rad. I mean, that would be way rad. But once again, that would require people like you to tell Congress that it's important for the NASA budget to go up by $500 million.
Well, who do we complain to fix all this stuff? I mean, is it to NASA? Is it to Congress?
People in Congress. People in Congress. I can tell you that right now. Each one of y'all, you know, the government has grown since '64 in a horrible way, in my view. But they have large machines that are prepared to take your voice messages, your emails, and they go talk about it. But you have to be careful and only write to somebody that you can vote for. Write to somebody that you can vote for. And this is going to sound silly. This is out of the box from where I was when I was y'all's age. But you know what? If you're like 2 or 3 of y'all are interested in this thing and want influence, take $10, put it together, and just have one person under one name send $30 to a candidate. And they note all that. They go to crazy links noting all of that. And then when your email comes in, they cross-correlate it to whether you sent that $30 in. I wish it wasn't like that, but that's the way the world is.
Going back to what you're saying with effective use of social media, what NASA is doing now is the things that they're putting out there are focused towards people like us, but like, what do they really need to do to get me into? I'm already into it, and they're focusing a lot of their efforts on things that aren't really going to help them.
That's where, you know, if your passion is to make a change, you're actually going to have to get out and find out what the average Joe wants to do. Next time you're on a plane, don't take over the conversation. Ask them what they think and listen. And then crank that through, and then you can fashion thoughts on how to do it. And you're right, we've got to figure out how to influence the average Joe. More so than the 1960s did.
Well, yeah, like all the things that they think are doing, like helping promote, it's just helping promote to people that are already in favor.
How many people are outside of 60 miles of a NASA center? Okay. How many people are outside of 100 miles of a NASA center? Now, what, NASA influences most of the newspapers and stuff in those areas. So it's very odd that you're in this room. It is odd it's in this room. And so I would suggest, in the hallways, you go talk to some of these people and see what they see when they go to the restaurant and when they're, at church or school or whatever. And find out what the perspective is of people that are outside of that influence of NASA centers. There's one thing that I would recommend. I got one more question, that's it.
I think a big part of that is every time the media does a report on something that NASA does, they put a spin on it like NASA's $200 million probe crashed today. Even if it was a complete success, they start with the number of how much it costs without referring to, like the Voyager mission cost $2 billion. And then this last Phoenix mission cost $230 million. Like, that is a very large difference to do the same goal. And no one recognizes that because the media puts this spin on it because it gets better ratings. And
you hit, I was actually, if you just stopped, that's where I was going to take you. Now, that last statement you made, if you want to make an effect, help NASA figure out what will sell newspapers to doing the right thing or the positive thing. I don't have the answer for you, but you could add so much to this national goal if you could figure out how NASA could help sell newspapers. And people like to be entertained, and there's a bunch of entertainment in NASA. I get entertained all the time. I think I got to call it the end. So I have really enjoyed talking to you guys and listening to you. So thank you for your participation.